There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on.
If you're missing your weekly Out Loud routine over the break, we wanted to let you know that we are still dropping episodes for Mamamia subscribers. So you can get full access to Out Loud, including the back catalogue of over 150 subscriber-only episodes. Subscribe to Mamamia via the link in the episode description.
Hello, Out Louders. It's Mia. Holly, Jessie and I are currently on our summer break. We really are. And while we're off, we thought we'd revisit some of our favourite conversations and topics from 2023 because there were a heap of them. We hope you enjoy this best of episode of Mamamia Out Loud.
Mamamia Out Loud! Recently, I was listening to an episode of a podcast called Best Friend Therapy, and it's hosted by Elizabeth Day and psychotherapist Emma Reed Terrell. And Reed Terrell identified 4 types of people pleasers. She's written a book called Please Yourself. And this is what she says about the different types. By the way, before I get onto these, each time she said one, I decided it was me because I think I wanted to people please.
You identify as a people pleaser.
Yes, I was like, I have to people please by being in each category. So first up, the classic people pleaser.
They will go above and beyond, helping people out, doing favours, granting wishes. Their raison d'etre is to make other people happy. And I call those the classics.
Nothing is too much trouble, and they thrive on the appreciation and the positive reinforcement they get when they've done more than their fair share. When you ask them what they want or what they like, they actually find it hard to answer because they don't know anymore.
Because they're so defined by pleasing everybody else
Yes.
that they've got no sense of what they actually want.
Yep. Then the second type is the shadow people pleaser.
And the shadow is actually the person who grew up around somebody who already occupied the limelight. So maybe they had narcissistic behaviors in the family of origin and they learned how to adapt to those, because the shadow is someone who gets their sense of validation from helping someone else realize their goals.
So they're everyone's favourite deputy and they don't put their needs first at all. Then there's the pacifier people pleaser. This is different because they're not trying to please, they're trying not to displease.
They want things to feel calm and safe and peaceful, and they will go to great lengths to make sure that happens. They might try to find a compromise in every situation or to use humour to lighten a mood.
Then there's the resistor. These people don't call themselves people pleasers. They say they don't care what people think. They avoid, reject, resist. And their philosophy is if they don't play, they can't lose.
They still had a relativity to the pressure to please, the idea that we should be complying with something.
So they've artificially thickened their skin because the fact is we all care what people think and it's actually natural and normal to care. So these people have built up a bit of an armour, but ironically it's because they have such a desire to please that they actually can't let it get to them. Mia, you're not a people pleaser.
Do you agree with that statement that you're not a people pleaser?
I don't know. I've been thinking about it. No, I don't.
One of my favourite things about you is that if I said, hey, Mia, do you want to go get a coffee? You would have absolutely no problem saying, no. And I love that about you. But I can't do that, and I'm jealous of that skill.
Right.
So that's quite healthy.
I have always I've been very independent since I was a kid, and I've always sort of had to look after myself and put my own needs first. So I'm very good at putting on my oxygen mask on.
Yes,
if that,
first. That's important.
So I know what I need to survive, and that has not necessarily been a good thing in all my relationships, and it's very challenging when you're a mother because you are meant to always put your children first, and sometimes I haven't. In terms of people pleasing though, I've had to grow a thick skin because you have to accept at a certain point when you work on the internet that there are people out there who hate you and people out there who are invested in hating you and who want to believe lies about you and nothing you say. I used to think if I can just explain to each of them individually, I will get them to come around. I don't think that anymore. That way madness lies.
Are you comfortable with the fact that there are some people who you have not pleased?
I don't like to be misunderstood or misjudged. I
don't think that you're. I mean, like,
don't like people to be mad at me. I don't like people to be mad at me.
Yes, but I don't think Mia sits around going like, "Oh, I'm glad that so and so is upset about that." Like, I don't think
the
so
opposite.
at all.
I don't like knowing that anyone out there is upset with me or mad with me. I mean, people that I know. If it's someone that I don't know, I realised I can't change that. What about you? Are you a shadow?
All of the above.
You
I think
talk
I'm
about
a little
being
bit
a
the
people
shadow.
pleaser heaps, right?
Yeah.
So Claire Stephens has always talked about this. And so it's obviously a big part of your personality and something I know you're trying to work on.
Yes.
So my theory is, because lots of women will be listening to this and nodding because women over-index in people pleasing for various reasons. I think this is really interesting because it draws some lines that I'd always wondered, because I'm definitely a people pleaser, but I'm not a classic. Like,
No, neither.
there are lots of things I don't do, and I certainly don't obsess about hosting perfect parties and be like volunteering at school,
You also
like doing all
don't-
that. Like, that's not me at all.
And you don't, organise the office cake
God, no.
or anything
I'm not,
like that.
I know some of those people, and I'm not that at all, much to some people's irritation. But I'm definitely a pacifier. That's what I am.
Yeah.
I get very sensitive to how other people are feeling about things. I want everybody to be comfortable, all that shit. That's definitely me. There are some situations, people I really know and trust and love, like I'm very comfortable having argy-bargy with them. But like, I hate to think that people are uncomfortable. But I want to know what you do to try and unpick people pleasing, because you are, as I say, you've been talking about this a lot. So what are you doing to try and combat your people pleasing tendencies?
Well, in this podcast, they talk about the fact that it's actually a fast track to intimacy when you state your boundaries. So if my friend says, "Do you want to go out for dinner?" and I say, you know what? Like, I don't. I'm kind of tired, or I'm trying to save money, whatever. That actually is better for your relationship.
That's so true.
Than me saying, yes, I'd love to go to dinner, and then being like, far out, I don't want to go, or cancelling last minute or whatever. And I noticed that I recently had a friend, we were planning something ahead of Jessie's wedding with a friend, and I was booking massages, and my friend said, "You know what? I actually don't love massages." And I was like, what a fun fact to know about you. I'm not offended. That does not change my plan that me and Jessie will get massages, whatever. But it actually brings you closer to somebody, and asserting your boundaries is not something that makes people dislike you. It makes people trust you more and trust that when you say you want to do something, you're telling the truth.
Because one of my toxic traits is that to avoid upsetting people, I'll skirt an issue. So it's like, I'd love to go out for dinner, Claire, and then we'll just never
I'll never like
make
initiate
it happen.
planning it.
And like, maybe you'll ask me and I might not reply, because in my mind I'm like, I don't want to say no. And so I'll kind of think, oh, well, that'll sort itself out. Like, and it never will.
Me too. I have this magical thinking that, or maybe I will feel like doing it.
I've learned the hard way because I've spent too many times saying yes to things. One of the big things we talk about, the no rule, and about when you're asked to do something, and often I'll be asked to do something. Will you come and speak at this event? Will you come and host this blah? Will you do this? And I used to say yes in the moment, because I wanted that person to like me and be happy with me in that moment. And I learned through experience, there's that 1 second that you get of the person being really happy that you've said yes. And then the impact that has on future you, that has to actually travel to the event, that has to make time and disrupt other people's lives to get there and let other people down, and on a night that you just want to be doing something else, it's not worth it. So it's only after I've done that time and time and time and time again. And I find that people like it much more when you're more direct. It's back to what you say. When you're a parent, because I've been a parent since I was 25, that is all about people pleasing. You know, it's not just about people pleasing people you don't know very well. It's also about always putting your needs
Well,
second.
I was going to ask, do you think
When your toddler wants you to read that book again or do a puzzle,
and you're like,
and
sure,
you'd rather stick a
sweetie,
chopstick in your eye.
Sure. Do you think women become less people pleasing the older they get?
Yes.
Hence the Karen
Yes.
stereotype.
I think in theory they do. I think there's a flip
It's
side
not
to
theory
that.
hole. It's
No,
it's
I
the
know
estrogen.
it's about the estrogen
Yeah.
and the people-pleasing hormones and your testosterone boosts and all. I've heard all that stuff, right? So I've heard lots of women talk about it. But there's a flip side to it. If you're panicking that you're becoming invisible, irrelevant, you know, that your position in the world is fragile because you're an aging woman and we don't like aging women, then being crotchety on top of all that is not great for brand. That can be true, that women are less people-pleasing as they get older. When I say brand, I don't mean like literally. I mean in the world. So I think that It
What do
can
you
be true
mean?
if you're feeling very confident in your position in the world, then that can be true. But if you're still trying to get things, then you still have to be people pleasing, and in some ways even more so.
Do men have to be people pleasing?
I think that there are men who are people pleasers, but I think it's more a female problem because of how we're socialized, that you just grow up being told that it's your job to make other people feel good.
I don't think all of that is negative. We could argue about this for a year probably, Mia, but I find myself doing it to my daughter. What was the situation the other day? But I do it to them both. Matilda was buying a new pair of footy trainers and the guy was coming over and fitting her with them. And I'm like, every time he comes, I'm like, say thank you, say please, say this, say that. And sometimes I'll be like, your face is a bit rude. Like, you know, I totally overcorrect because I don't think there's anything wrong with considering other people's feelings and making sure that other people's days are going well.
No,
and all
but when
that
you
stuff.
take that to the extreme, when the Me Too movement happened, and so many women talked about instances of sexual harassment and how a woman's instinct, you know, they're the fight, flight, freeze or fawn, and the fawn response is when we try to make someone feel okay about a situation because, you know, there's that thing that a man's biggest fear is being embarrassed and a woman's biggest fear is being killed. And so we learn that for our survival, it's important to seek the approval of people who are in positions of power over us, whether it's physical power or, you know, structural power.
Jessie Stephens, it's been a very exciting week for you. It's one of the reasons, obviously, why you're on today is because you've been doing the rounds talking about your incredible new book, which is your first novel, Something Bad Is Going to Happen. We have to clear up, first of all, everybody is like, how is it your first novel? What about Heartsick, that best-selling work of genius? That wasn't a novel, everyone. That was nonfiction.
Yes. My mum's an English teacher and she wasn't aware of the distinction. So novel means fiction and then you've got nonfiction. Second book, first novel.
And it's brilliant. I've read it. We are going to be talking about it, but specifically. So it's about a young woman called Adela who's in her late 20s and she is in a psychiatric unit. And the novel follows basically what has brought Adela to the place that she's in. And it's a really incredible, beautiful, sometimes brutal exploration of mental illness and the life of a young woman in modern times. And it's so good, Jessie. It's so good. I mean, obviously.
Thank you.
It's so good. You've done a brilliant interview already with Mia for No Filter about how much of this novel is based on your own experiences. And we're going to put a link in the show notes to that. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was about how Adela's experience of mental illness impacts the people around her, right? You've written some incredibly moving and confronting sometimes passages about her sister, Lottie, her interactions with her friends. And I think that people who know and love anyone who struggles with mental illness, obviously people who struggle with mental illness are going to feel incredibly seen by this book, and I know they're already saying that. But another group of people who are going to feel very seen are those of us who know and love people who suffer from mental illness and how to kind of handle, support, love people through that. Talk to me about what you wanted to say about that in this book.
I'm really glad that you noticed that because it was one of the most difficult things to write about candidly, because the last thing you want to do is make someone who is severely depressed feel more guilty than they already do about the toll it's taking on everyone else. But to pretend that it's not taking a toll on everyone else is also untrue. And I've been on both sides of that. And I wanted to speak to both because I was thinking even, Are You OK Day is coming up. And that day is about asking the people who are not okay if they're okay and then pointing them to helpful resources. The fact that our world ends up becoming separated into the okay and the not okay means that that's an enormous amount of responsibility for the people in families who are well and who might have people around them who have depression or anxiety or bipolar or addiction issues. And they get into a dynamic where they're always the ones looking after the other person. I don't think it's doing us a service either to pretend that something like depression is like every other chronic illness, because it's also not. People say, oh, you know, it's like cancer, or it's like you don't choose it. So in that way it is. But there are behavioral elements that really aren't like that. And so I've been in the situation of being surrounded by people with depression. I feel like I have license to say this because I've also been the person with it, where you think, okay, I can see the wheels are falling off. I can see that you're not sleeping, you're not eating properly, you're making a series of decisions that are not going to be a good thing for your mental health. I can see where this is all going. How do I intervene? Sympathy, does that make me an enabler, or do I do the tough love thing?
And also, if you do the tough love thing and it doesn't work, or you do express, as in one amazing scene in this, Adela's sister Lottie does, when Adela goes to Lottie's engagement party and is basically a massive downer. Yep. She's late. She doesn't talk to anyone. There's a scene where Lottie kind of unloads about that. The thing is that also pushes the person who's suffering away, right? Yeah. Because if you're honest about how that's impacting other people, then that person just becomes more isolated because they're like, not only is my life awful, but I'm making everyone else's life awful. I mean, this is one of the things about writing fiction is, did you want to offer solutions, or is it more like putting it out there?
That's interesting what you say about writing fiction. It's the only format where you can truly look at both sides and explore the nuance of it as sensitively as you possibly can, because we know that people who self-harm will often say they feel like a burden. So how do we ever voice the experience of the carers? Because a lot of people are listening to this are officially or not carers of people in their life with mental illness. And the thing is that if you live alongside someone with depression, there might be acute episodes, but it also could be decades and decades and decades. And you're not a qualified psychologist. So your frustration is entirely valid, yet you feel like you can't say the things out loud. Who do you say them to? But they're a part of our lives. Like, you want to say, get it together. You want to say, get out of bed. You want to say, I'm doing all of these things to try and protect and nurture my mental health, and you're not. What I loved about reading your book is the way it showed the reality that relationships do crumble when you're not well. When you have depression or anxiety, you isolate yourself. And I don't mean that in that you do it in an active, intentional way. I mean that the behaviors that are symptoms of depression are things that lead to isolation. And I love that you've got a scene where Adela behaves badly and she really upsets a friend, and the friend cuts her off because she's done something mean and selfish, and the friend is clearly trying to protect her own well-being and deciding that she only wants people around her who are going to treat her well. I wondered, with the Adela and Lottie dialogue, I every now and then thought, these are conversations we've had.
Or wanted to have.
I'm like, Jessie is just putting words in Lottie's mouth that she's wanted to say to me, which are things like, I've tried so hard to not talk to myself like that. And to hear you saying all of those words out loud, to hear the depressive narrative coming out of your mouth is distressing to me and is making it harder for me to live in the bubble I've created. So thanks for that.
You actually talk about this a little bit in that interview with Mia that I found fascinating, which was that because there is depression, I know that this is a work of fiction, I'm going to keep saying that, but you have experience of it, which is why you can explore it so beautifully. You talk about in that interview with Mia how because there is depression in your family, among you siblings, that sometimes you're like, oh, I can't be around that because that's going to like literally trigger you, in the correct use of the word trigger. That's a big thing to say. Like, as in, is everybody all right? How are you all reacting to that being out in the open?
I think that we've all been the ones that are floating and we've all been the ones that are drowning. And both experiences are valid. We have enough self-awareness to know. And this is a conversation you can probably have when you're in a good space. It's not one I would feel like having when I was really down. But there's something very antisocial about my state of depression. It's incredibly narcissistic and self-involved. I'm not saying that everyone's is, but there are features of the illness that make you unable to see the world outside yourself. And you know that. And that's why that's even more depressing. And unable to take on really obvious advice from people.
I want to know from you two just on this before we move on. I'm telling everyone about this book. I'm like, it is going to change lives, like for people who are suffering, but also people who are caring for people who are. What is helpful? Like, what is helpful for your partners or the people in your family or in your sibling dynamic when you can see that you, in your words, somebody is sinking? What is helpful?
I think knowing, and this is a conversation I've had with a lot of people, that some of the things you're looking at going, they won't get out of bed, they won't do this, they won't do that, if they just blah, are features of the illness. So just framing it like that, I think, is a really important place to start, because then that affords you a bit of empathy. I also think that what this book is about, the people around you, no matter how hard they try, probably can't pull you out of this. It is something that you have to do. And I have a thing in the book about it going, all right, so I'm the illness, but I'm also the cure, because it's all in my head, right? That's also not true, because you don't need to do it yourself. There's help available, which, you know, there's lots of things in the book about how hard that is to get. But you can leave that to the professionals. If you're a spouse or a mother or a sibling, don't think you need to fix this. You're not going to fix it. And that doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means it's actually impossible. That person is ill and needs to get help. So I think directing them to the right people is certainly a start.
I agree that it's not something that somebody else can necessarily cure for you, but I kind of disagree. In the book, there are two characters, and I won't spoil it, but two characters towards the end who play pivotal roles, and they do exactly what it is that you're meant to do. You don't say it in some really didactic way, you just show it in the novel, but they listen without judgment, encourage the person to talk, let them know they're concerned and ask what they need, discuss their strengths and give them positive feedback. They spend time together. They take their feelings seriously. And you really see that it is the people who do that that are absolutely crucial to Adela's recovery.
And you're not going to see that recovery overnight. And I think that's another thing. That frustration is,
I want to tell everybody that Something Bad is Going to Happen is available in all good bookshops. But what's also good news is that all Mamamia subscribers, I don't know if you know this, Mamamia subscribers, but you get 10% off books at Booktopia. So if you're a subscriber, buy it from Booktopia. Also support independent bookstores, everybody, but 10% off at Booktopia. We'll put a link in the show notes for you to go and buy Jessie's book.
We talk a lot about different types of etiquette on this show, from dating etiquette to friendship to workplace to red carpet etiquette, in fact. And a recent newsletter from a journalist we all love called Jill Filipovich has put forward a call for a universal social norm of actually socialising, and she's called it Get Off Your Damn Phone.
You guys are always on your phones. Why don't you have a decent conversation for a change?
I wonder what she's trying to advocate for.
Well, she wrote about one particular incident which sparked her vitriol. She said, in a 24-hour period in Cape Town, I watched a visiting British family enter a busy restaurant at dinner time, prop up an iPad in front of two previously perfectly behaved children, turn on Boss Baby at full volume, and then proceed to shout at each other over the din they created. That is when the parents weren't scrolling away on their own phones, while the grandparents tried to interact with the movie-watching grandchildren. The next morning, out at a popular brunch place, I watched a woman sitting next to me stare at her date for a solid hour while he scrolled through his phone, played TikTok videos loud for his own amusement, and took a few calls on speaker. So she's put together 7 rules. Do you want to hear them?
Yes.
1, no volume, never. 2, put your phone away when you're sitting down for a meal with other people. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Actually, what I usually do, I keep it out of my bag, but I turn it over.
I turn it over too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Exceptional circumstances. If there's some call that you're waiting for, sick kids, you're like, oh, I'm waiting for a call from work or something.
Yeah.
But you've got to flag it early.
I had dinner with a girlfriend a number of years ago, and I was like trying to do this. And so I turned off my phone, put it in my bag, and I'm like, I want to be present in this moment. And then as we were walking out of the restaurant, I turned my phone back on. There were like 8 texts, 6 missed calls from home.
Who'd broken a bone?
It was Jay saying, the ambulance is coming, Coco's hurt her neck, blah, blah, all this stuff. And then it was resolved. It had all happened during the 2 hours my phone had been off. And I guess the moral of the story is he handled it. But would I have liked to know at the time? Probably. And I remember my friend Bron said to me, we can never turn our phone off. We're mothers.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of dripping judgment in that first anecdote there about the toddler with Boss Baby.
Yeah.
I very much agree with the no volume ever.
I suspect Jill doesn't have babies.
I think you're right. People who aren't parents yet always really judge people who give their toddlers or kids screens in public.
Well, her third rule relates to that. She said parents should decide for themselves and their families whether they want to allow screens for children and in which context. And she said, and no one else gets to say anything if an iPad is keeping a child calm on a plane or at a restaurant. However, volume rules apply, headphones or it's a silent screen.
And I think that that's fair enough, but I think that any parent of toddlers would know there will sometimes be, you've forgotten the headphones, the toddler's going to scream the place down if they don't get to listen to, like, I'm not condoning that first anecdote. I think it's very selfish to play anything with the volume up. And I catch public transport a lot and I always sit in the quiet carriage on a train, right? And I do this train journey up and down the coast. I always sit in the quiet carriage where you are not supposed to have anything with volume and your headphones have to be quiet and you're not allowed to take calls. And there are people who will get into that carriage and watch their TV show or their porn perhaps, have a call with a family member without headphones at the top of their voice. And I think that those people should be thrown from the train. I would never, ever confront them though, because a person who will watch a movie loudly in a quiet carriage is not a person you want to fuck with.
2 more rules. She said no screens on and obviously no volume on in the movies or anywhere where it's dark, like ballet, operas, plays, whatever, where you need a dark room. And her last rule is look up when you're walking if you're in a busy area. That's true. I'm terrible at this.
That's the one I break the most.
Same.
I will, if I even say walk my dog, so I'll be walking my dog for 45 minutes, I can get all my emails done. I can write a whole story while I'm walking. And I don't do it well. I trip.
Yeah.
The dog gets in trouble. It doesn't work. But this is the funny thing about phones, which makes it different to other etiquette. When you are looking at your phone, you are no longer in the social world and you are no longer picking up on any social cues.
Correct.
So when I'm on my phone, if I was sitting here looking at it, I think it's totally justified because, guys, I'm just replying to this text. You know that that's just going to take me 30 seconds. Whereas to you, it's a completely different spectacle.
It removes you.
It completely removes you. And I've had this, you know, the joke where you're at dinner with your partner or your sister or whatever and you keep yelling at each other to get off your phone because what they're doing can wait, but what I'm doing can't. And so when you are immersed, you just can't see how rude you're being to everyone around you.
And parents do this too with their kids. I spend all my time yelling at my kids to get off their phones and I am very frequently on my phone while I am yelling at them to get off theirs.
I have an etiquette question that I came across just this weekend, right? I've wanted to run by you. The other day I'm out and I'm on the phone to my mum. Been really busy, haven't been able to talk to her for a while and we're really 25 minutes into a really good chat. And I was waiting on something, so I went into a shop and I picked up a T-shirt and I was like, I'm going to buy this T-shirt. So I went to the counter. I'm still on the phone to mum, had the T-shirt at the thing, and the person would not serve me until I got off the phone. She was looking at me and I was kind of like, tap or whatever. And it wasn't until I said, Mum, I'll call you back or whatever. And I said to her, oh, can I just grab this T-shirt? But I was standing there for a good 10 minutes waiting to be served. That probably isn't very polite by me, but what do we think? Do we need to get off the phone, call, and interact with the retail worker in order to buy a T-shirt?
Been in retail, I would be stoked that I didn't have to make small talk with you.
I thought that.
You have to recognise that that person's a human.
It's not a robot.
That person is not the thing in the supermarket where you just go beep, beep, beep. That person's a human. You have to, and I get it. Like we've all been in that situation where, but this is really important or I'm just going to be really quick or whatever it is. I mean, and I've done it plenty of times. But I think that really it's one of the things that's making us all worse as people. So in order to change that, you have to do the uncomfortable thing, which is acknowledge that that person is entitled to a social interaction.
There's one more etiquette rule that I want to throw on there. Do not perform listening when you're texting. So if you do need to text at a dinner and people go, no, I'm still listening. And they will scroll through their phone and they're not, you can't. So the most polite thing is to go, I'm so sorry. Give me 10 seconds to reply.
Yes.
Conversation stops. But the performing of the listening drives me mental.
That's all we have for today. And if you're missing us over the summer break, and frankly, who wouldn't be? I mean, I'm going to miss you both. We are still releasing new episodes for our subscribers. So if you're interested and want to join us, follow the link in the show notes.
And a big thank you to all our current subscribers.